You're listening to the Inbound Logistics Podcast with today's guest, Stephen Johanson, Senior Vice President, Industry Principal for Network Optimization at Logility. The one certainty in the supply chain is uncertainty. Everything from economic upheaval and geopolitical instability to climate changes and technological advancements all contribute to an industry that could benefit from even one stabilizing element. An efficiently optimized network that can parse large amounts of data and help predict and navigate through those uncertainties might just be the place to start. Stephen Johanson of Logility takes us through the ins and outs of network optimization. Joining us today on the Inbound Logistics Podcast is Stephen Johanson, Senior Vice President, Industry Principal for Network Optimization for Logility. Stephen, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Thanks, Jeff.
Welcome. Stephen, if you could, please do us a favor and introduce yourself to our audience. Tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background, and what you're doing with Logility today.
Certainly. Thanks. Yeah, my name is Steve Johanson. You got my title from Jeff. I am the industry principal at Logility. Before that, I was the founder of a company called Starboard that originated a network optimization tool. And before that, I had about 20 years of management consulting. And as obscure personal fact, I used to teach celestial navigation to college students.
Excellent. That's fascinating. Cool. Let's talk about where the stars are headed for us with everything that's going on in the world today. The big bugaboo is tariffs. With the tariff changes that are happening in 2025 and beyond, what are some of the biggest challenges that companies are facing in terms of keeping costs under control while they're trying to maintain supply chain efficiency?
Good question. And it's easy for me to say, but overreacting. Companies can really be playing the beer games times 5 or 10 with themselves here. A lot of meetings I've gone to in literally the last couple weeks, executives are setting up situation rooms, doing some reactionary tariff avoidance, moving inventory into and out of countries. And this has a lot of hidden costs, usually in the areas of service or inventory. So you can think of supply chains as they're a beating heart. Your customers, your distribution centers, even your production plants are expecting a constant drumbeat of product moving down the line. When people overreact and change these flows, they interrupt that heartbeat and the blood flow.
All right, speaking of that flow then, how do businesses build flexibility into their flow to quickly adjust to the fluctuating tariffs and some of those regulatory changes?
It boils down to options. So being able to build a bench of qualified alternative suppliers. For those companies starting with options, they've got a good starting point. The ones that don't have them, there's varying leading times to set them up. And here it gets different by industry. Complex supplier relationships such as semiconductors, automotive, really the time it takes to qualify and set up a supplier is years often. So those companies are working with what they have in place. Other industries might rely on easily qualified products like injection molding or apparel, and new suppliers can be found in short order. So they have options, but it always boils down to options and quantifying them in terms of total landed cost, impact to service level, and really weighing in that cost of change. Can I keep that heartbeat to my customers and my distribution centers matched up without having a gap?
All right, excellent. Now, what about for businesses that rely on exports? How do they prepare for potential counter tariffs from key trade partners?
Right. Well, first, there's a prediction difficulty in that now we're predicting United States tariffs, initiating other tariffs, and the timing for that. So predicting it is very difficult, but it really still comes down to options. I'm going to put a twist in on this one, which is counter tariffs affect domestic manufacturing. If someone is manufacturing in the United States right now, they're doing it for a reason, and they might have to continue. So the problem actually switches more to pricing and demand planning, being able to gauge your price sensitivity of your customers, and then also be able to mold that into a predictive demand plan so that you can plan for the outbound.
All right, let's touch on that planning. What role does scenario planning and supply chain simulation play in helping companies access the financial and operational impact of counter tariffs?
Personally, I think scenario planning is everything. When I'm talking to a client, I'll usually go to a board and draw 3 giant circles. total landed cost, service level, and optionality. And really, companies are going to be weighing these at different proportions. And being able to put numbers to the first two and weigh options to the third will give me a picture of what I can do. And one observation I've had for over, and has been consistent over the 20 years I've been doing this sort of work, is that really good supply chain leaders never pick the quantitatively optimum solution. They will look at, hey, here's the best cost, here's the best service, this is my starting point, and they will bake into their future plans the optionality of what might happen in the future.
All right, excellent. Now, if we go beyond tariffs, we've seen major supply chain disruptions from geopolitical tensions as well. Climate events, labor shortages. What best practices can help companies stay resilient amid all of these uncertainties?
Right. And that's a good point to bring up is you don't want to lose the vision by having it be obscured with tariffs. They're just one of the expected changes in the coming years. Uh, One good example you brought up is labor shortages. That was a very hot topic, caused a lot of people interruptions or cost increases last year. And according to the press, strikes and shortages are expected this year, as well as additional shifts in demand and cost. Your normal supply chain still is a little bit of a waterbed where costs, demand, performance is constantly moving. Solution still comes down to building a model that you can look at the cost, service, and build optionality and scenarios into that. And that will help guide and activate your plans. And one thing to keep in mind is just keeping the current course often is a good solution if you don't reach a certain threshold of optionality. Your costs don't increase enough, your service doesn't increase better. Sometimes just eating a tariff or eating a small cost is better than the cost of change.
All right, let's go to another buzzword then with AI. How do AI-driven network optimizations, how do they help businesses make data-backed decisions in a world where the supply chain variables are constantly shifting?
Well, first, I'm going to say we are just getting started with AI. In network optimization, uncertainty is a huge factor and also demands massive amounts of data. It's a great technology for predicting uncertainty. We already mentioned the role in demand planning, which is a very near cousin to network optimization. And that is a perfect application of AI. But also, let's talk about the data side. So, for example, I can make a model of a network, drop a number of warehouses, distribution centers, plants, ports, and just from their latitude and longitude, I can do a generative AI search and bring in all sorts of pertinent but unstructured data into my model. I haven't asked the analyst to go out and grab millions of data points that may or may not be pertinent, but I can bring these into an unstructured data model, and then now that's available for my own searches and my own solving to give me a much broader, better solution. And this information, let's get back to optionality, it feeds that optionality function of the big circle that I was describing.
All right. Now, what industries are most vulnerable to these trade policy shifts, and how should they be thinking about mitigating risk? In particular, Inbound Logistics is the supply chain management lead for Xometry, which is a U.S.-based AI and demand-driven manufacturing leader. So can you answer that in terms of, say, developments in global manufacturing as well? Because that's something, obviously, that we're interested in.
Right. Well, I'm going to lead the list of industries with high-end electronics and think of semiconductors and skilled assembly of products. So again, these are industries that feel a little trapped with their supplier base and have limited elbow room to change their flows. So they might be hit right on the chin. Other areas are, materials, sorry, not really that manufacturing intensive, but, again, I think steel and aluminum only come from certain places. They're hit pretty hard. Energy is another fixed one. But to get back to the manufacturing side, let's look at companies that think of themselves as low margin, high price sensitivity. And I have to throw in a joke. I don't know any industry that doesn't think of themselves as, low margin, low sensitivity, or high margin, low sensitivity. But those companies really are the ones that are sensitive and really need to find those alternative paths to flow material through. So instead of eating if you have a tariff increase that looks like it's going to bump your cost up 100 million, you want to try to look, you're like, if I can re-optimize end to end, can I find the solution that only bumps me 55, 60 million dollars?
All right, about those alternative paths. Nearshoring and reshoring. What are some of the key economic, operational, logistical factors that businesses should evaluate if they're going to consider nearshoring or reshoring?
All right. In your last question, we focused on industries, and the answer is that this still is industry specific. Each sector has a different cost sensitivity and risk profiling. But offshoring, it's trended towards being more expensive, and it will continue to trend towards being more expensive. Small little increments. But another factor in there is the enormous distances. U.S. Canadian companies sourcing from Asia have vast oceans to cross, many countries to go through, and that will continue to be hidden cost, a hidden burden, and a risk to disruptions. So I think the arrows have varying vectors, but they're all pointing towards nearshoring and reshoring very slowly, very gradually.
All right, can you go into some of those hidden costs then? Are there other hidden costs or unintended consequences that companies might overlook when they're making these supply chain shifts?
Right. Well, I talked about my concept of the heartbeat. That's the first and obvious, and it's actually quantifiable that you want to keep that stream and that pulse of orders, replenishments going and ticking. All right. In any interruption, you really need to avoid. Okay, but the truly hidden ones is just the cost of change, right? Having done this, changes for hundreds of companies, it's the stress on the people. It takes planners away from planning, logistics people away from logistics. Uh, it just stresses the people. It stresses the customers. They're changing. Sometimes there's modifications to the products. Sometimes there's modifications to the ship to points, but the relationship's strained. And then we get to service level. We talked about that heartbeat. Uh, you know, it takes a very sharp company and a great system to be on top of change as far as, I'll be specific, inventory and safety stock. That is the catch-all that saves companies from shortages. But getting that safety stock right and not exploding the systems is very, very hard, and it's often a secondary consideration.
All right, looking ahead then, are nearshoring and reshoring efforts, are they short-term trends or uh, might they be a long-term strategic shift for global supply chains?
Right. On this one, I'm going to cheat and repeat a great study I just read. It was McKinsey, and it's aptly called "Is Nearshoring in Fashion?" There's a great graph on that one, but it basically shows that based on their survey since 2014, there's been this gradual shift from offshoring towards specifically Canada and Mexico production or supplying, right? Small and gradual, but it's also industry specific. They found that apparel, the shift isn't from offshoring to nearshoring, it's from China to other Asian suppliers. So again, industry specific, you know, but this trend might also slow or speed up. Now Canada and Mexico are targets for tariffs. So, but it still comes down to a company's ability to look at their supply chain, model it, model the options, quantify their decisions, and above all, build that optionality into the roadmap. So optionality should become, a word that's spoken in these strategic planning meetings.
All right. Well, if our audience wants to look more into optionality and get some help with planning, where can we send them to get some of that information?
Right. Straight to logility.com or find me on LinkedIn.
Excellent. And those links will be in the show notes. Stephen, thank you so much for some of your insights. Best of luck to you and best of luck to Logility.
Thanks.
Inbound Logistics Magazine is the information leader in supply chain and logistics management. Start your free print and digital subscription today by visiting bit.ly/getil. That's bit.ly/get_il and stay ahead of the 3PL game.
The Inbound Logistics Podcast is a production of Inbound Logistics Magazine. For the most in-depth information around logistics, transportation, and supply chain practices, get your free print and digital subscription at inboundlogistics.com/subscribe. Connect with us via LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube for the most current developments in the industry. If you'd like to leave us some feedback or have a topic you'd like to see covered in a future episode, call our Dialog line at 888-878-3247 or leave us an email at podcast@inboundlogistics.com. I'm your host, Jeff Ida. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time here on the Inbound Logistics Podcast.